Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. Welcome back. If this is a place you come regularly, I appreciate you so much. And if it's your first time, welcome. Very glad you've chosen to watch our show today of all of your options. I have a fantastic guest today who's going to talk to you about something I am not very good at, which is activism. I'm actually not an activist, so I'm not the person to teach you how to be one, but I did invite someone here who can do that. But before we get started today, I want to let you know that we've got some exciting stuff going on here at The Reason We Learn. Your overwhelming support and encouragement in the comments and becoming subscribers and sharing these broadcasts has put me in a position to work with people who want to help me take this platform to the next level. So I'm very grateful and I'm very excited about it. I'm dying to tell you more now, but I've been advised not to. So suffice to say, your support has inspired some great things. And until I can tell you more, please continue to like, share, and subscribe. But the very best way that you can help is by word of mouth in your real lives. There are so many parents, educators, and simply concerned Americans out there who are desperate for a direction, who want to fix the problem, and we want The Reason We Learn to be their meeting hall. That means we need people like you spreading the word at social gatherings, PTA meetings, church, anywhere that people can be found who understand the importance of what we're doing. Please encourage them to be part of the solution too. So thank you again for your support and keep tuning in for details as they come. Now, today's guest is Candace Mercer. She is an artist, writer, activist based in the Pacific Northwest. She has spent the past 7 years reporting on homelessness, public safety, and political violence. In 2021, she ran for Olympia City Council in Washington. And with an innovative social media campaign, her current projects include pain, patient advocacy, and teaching effective and ethical activism. And she is here today to help us. Welcome, Candace.
Thank you, Deb, for having me. I'm really excited to share some lessons learned with your audience.
I am so glad you're here because this is not my area of expertise. So, with that said, tell the audience about your background in this area. Tell us about how you got into this.
Well, I would say I've been doing activism for about 30 years, based out of Olympia, Washington, where becoming an activist is almost like a given that you're active in any number of causes. It's almost like your civic duty. So I got pretty deep into activism. I worked for a decade with Craig and Cindy Corey from the Rachel Corey Foundation for Peace and Justice. Their daughter Rachel was killed in 2003 in Gaza, in Rafah, Gaza. An Israeli Defense Forces bulldozer ran her over. And so her parents were kind of thrust into the spotlight trying to find out what happened and get justice for Rachel. In the process, we developed a sister city relationship with the community that Rachel died protecting. And so I learned from two of the very best, incredibly decent people who took activism absolutely to the top level. They're internationally renowned. They've won dozens of peace prizes, including the Yoko Ono Peace Prize. And they are a model for a lot of the work I do going forth.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you learned, like you said, from the best. I mean, you were dealing with a very, very real issue that needed immediate attention. But we have today is we have something that's been brewing for, decades. And yet a lot of the people who are most affected are only just kind of waking up. So the people they would be fighting, or the forces or institutions they'd be fighting, have a huge head start, even including the activism for it. So in other words, there've been activists fighting to get things the way they are, and the parents have just been kind of showing up and bringing their kids. So why should the parents now fight? I say on my channel, get out. And people are saying, well, we still have to fight. And they're right. And you're right. I just don't know how, because I see it as they have a head start. So what should they do?
Well, absolutely. And in general, activism is addressing a problem that's not being addressed. And in this climate, the word activist kind of gets a dirty connotation. We see activism gone awry that's being done in unethical manner, I feel. But the biggest reason, and I do want to make this point, even as an activist, I do not believe that kids should be taught activism in school or participate in activist activities in school. That's proselytizing, and that absolutely should be separate. Woke is a form of religion at this point, and even as an activist, I think that boundary should be strict. For parents who are new to activism, activism is about affecting social change or changing social attitudes. And the biggest reason that parents need to get involved is that nobody is going to save you. There's nobody that's going to swoop in and make it stop. It's coming down to you and people like you saying, no, this is wrong, enough. So I think it's important when you're doing your activism to live true to your values and have agency in the situation. Even though you may feel powerless, you have a lot more power than you realize. It's just learning how to use it effectively and efficiently, and targeting the right points where you can put that pressure and find a wedge in.
Hmm.
Another important part of doing activism, and it's harder to measure, but just doing advocacy, educating people about your issue.
So I am
That
an activist by accident. I'm educating people, right?
right? Well, exactly. And I people that are new to this, it really comes to them as a surprise. For people, like myself or James Lindsay, other people who are studying it, we can help provide guideposts from what we've learned. I living in Olympia, where there's Evergreen State College, so I really have seen this evolve and build. And I'm coming from the left, I understand the dynamics quite well. And so I think I'm in a unique position to be able to attack it, and that's one reason I am doing this.
Right. Now
Um,
I've heard you say that protest is dead. What do you mean by that?
well, that's actually it's a book by this author named Micah Wright, who was a founder of the Occupy movement. Protest is dead in that I think when people think of activism, that might be one of the first thing they think of, protests, petitions, things like that. Basically, those are rather impotent time wasters. They can serve other purposes in, connection, morale, media attention, sure, but they are not what's going to affect change in the climate we are today. Right now, the biggest problem we're having, our real crisis, is lack of leadership. We need leaders who are willing to go into this battle and take it on. People like Azra Nomani down in Virginia, like she's been absolutely wonderful with the Loudoun County and Fairfax district. She just broke a story about a nurse stealing medication from the children. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, Ozra's like a fireball. She's amazing.
she is
So,
something. And I think it's really easy to get stuck in complaining. It's really easy to get stuck in analysis, figuring, out the situation, which you need to do to some extent to be effective. But what's required right now is action. You need to be thoughtful and targeted, and don't waste your energy on doing things that will not ultimately get you to your goal. You need to look for the points of leverage.
interesting. Okay. And so what would those be in terms of, I mean, in general, but like we're in my audience, they're thinking about like education, the schools, public schools, things like that. What would those points of leverage be?
Well, first of all, running for the school board, running for whatever office you feel that you can shoot for. A school board, a lot of times the positions run unopposed. A lot of times the positions come down to maybe even a few dozen votes. So we've seen some communities have success and some have failure in taking over their school boards. But if you really want control of your schools, that's the route. Running for your city council, running for a county position, it it's easy to think that it's overwhelming and that I'm not that person. I'm not a politician. But I guarantee you that most every one of your viewers is as smart as the people that are in office right now, and if not smarter.
I was going to say, probably smarter.
Yes, do not. I when I ran for city council in 2021, and one of my biggest barriers in the beginning was a lack of confidence. Like, I mean, it's an ethical question. Can I handle this? Will I be able to handle the pressure? Um, I'm disabled, so will I be able to handle it health wise? And whatever time constraints you have, it comes down to time and money. It's an incredibly time consuming, and even if you raise money for your campaign, you're going to have personal costs additional. I urge people to have that leap of faith and jump in. Throw, the way I looked at it is I felt I cared enough about my city to at least try, and that I would be a force for good on the city council and a voice that nobody's hearing. And one thing I I I felt I had a good chance of winning. I didn't think it was futile. But I also set myself up for win-win. And great if I won, that's the goal. I'm very competitive. So I fought as hard as I could, but I also wanted to be okay if I lost. And psychologically, because I didn't want to have election day come and just be like drained, etc. So I made sure that I had fun during my campaign. I enjoyed it, like that I personally got fulfillment out of it. I leveled up my art. I started making videos. I learned how to give a speech. I made my own website. I did all these things that I had never done before. And, got to have experiences and meet people I never would have met otherwise. And, to the awareness question, I got my message in front of thousands of people, and I wouldn't have had that, and from an active purely I approached my campaign as an activist, not a politician. Um, and so an activist to get people forced to listen to my message, because I had to go on all these forums, and so that was absolutely wonderful. So I urge you to approach it not as it's a duty, certainly, but don't make it a slog. Don't make it a death march. Find ways to level up yourself professionally. I started wearing makeup again after 20 years. So when I lost, it was disappointing, certainly. But I still feel I had won in so many other ways. So I think that's a really important psychological aspect.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I think with the stakes being as high as they are, people have a tendency to see it as a zero sum game of I won or I lost. But there's a lot to be won just by, as you say, being put in a position where people are almost forced to listen to you. And even if you, and let's face it, even if you won, and this is something I'm only thinking about right now. So those of you who've been watching me for months and said, but Deb, you've actually told people maybe not to run for school board and take their money and take their energy and do something else. Well, I'm speaking mostly to parents who have little kids in the school right now where your kids need you, right? They need your support and attention, on things going on in their classrooms to protect them, and that may not be your best use of resources. But what I hear Candace saying that has gotten me inspired is if you aren't that person, Maybe your kids are flown and grown, or maybe you're just a concerned taxpayer or a concerned teacher, retired teacher, somebody else who wants to be involved. The great thing is you are going to be heard. And even if you win and then you don't get to be heard because you're outnumbered, you were still heard during your campaign. Like your campaign is a great time to get that message out. And then you might be sitting there and maybe you're being marginalized or silenced will carry its own message, right? Like let's say people didn't show up, but the next go around, maybe you can then, run again or get somebody else to run with you who says, I didn't like watching you sit there and you weren't able to speak or they drowned you out or whatever. It's like a slow burn, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm starting to see because of you, there are lots of different ways to win.
Absolutely. And I think you need to have a shorter goal, but you also need to be playing a long game. They've played a very long game, and you're right. The growth you can build upon it.
Yeah.
I'm still deciding whether I'm going to run for mayor next year. I haven't decided yet or not.
Do it.
But I think why it was important to me is my city has become dystopian because of homeless encampments and people living in these open air drug markets that are just a humanitarian crisis, and nobody is being served, and it's dominating our community, and nobody was willing to say this is wrong. And so I know from running, I would have regretted not running. And why I'm proud and happy I did run is I know I can sleep at night. I have the self respect of knowing I did everything I could to help make my city a better place. I gave it my all. I left it all on the table. And I think it's really important if you're going to get into this work to have that passion. You have to care really deeply about your cause. And of course, your children, what better cause could there be? Um, so and I think you also, and this took a little while for me to come around to, you also have to find some joy in the fight. You, you, you will, the energy will come to you as you progress through what you need to do for running for office. It might seem overwhelming at first, but the path will kind of become clear, and at least at a local level, it's not that complicated.
That's you're I was just showing these statements, but I'm going to put them up again. John says, doing something, even if it's not a success, still inspired others to say, maybe I should try doing something. That is such a good point. And I feel sort of bad because I've been kind of a doubting Thomas. I've been negative about running for school board because I know that it's not a panacea. In other words, getting on the school board itself is not going to fix what's wrong in education. But you're bringing up so many important points about why you do it anyway that I hadn't thought of. So that's why you're here. And then Kieran says, you're the inspiration I needed today, Candace. It's important, guys, to say when you were wrong or when you were short-sighted. I try to do that.
Well, and I think going to the first poster's point too, by speaking out and getting your ideas into the marketplace. I saw this happen around homelessness. Believe it or not, in 2019 in Olympia, it was kind of third rail to talk about the connection between substance abuse and the homeless camps, and also the theft. Let me adjust my camera there. The theft, the associated theft and impacts on the community. You weren't allowed to talk about it. And I found that my work helped break through that because I started writing about it honestly. I had no idea what nest I was wading into. I mean, I had a little idea, but I didn't think the backlash would be so severe. Um, but just calling attention to the hypocrisies I was hearing from the service providers and the council members about it. And I found, going back to the point, is that once I started talking about it, it kind of opened a floodgate. Like people then felt more comfortable talking about it, literally changing the conversation. And I I think it gives other people feel this in themselves. They see the drag queen story hour and they feel uneasy and they may not be able to articulate it. So if you can go out there and say, this is wrong, kids should not be in drag shows, and you give reasoned, you know, decent reasons why, people then will be able to express what they're feeling, but they weren't able to express. And
Mhm.
that's the ultimate role of the art when you combine art with activism is, art is about teaching people other ways to think,
Mhm.
showing them other ways to think. And so art and activism combine together really well for that,
That's
for
a
what it's
great
worth,
that's a
because
great
people are
point.
feeling these things. We know the majority of America is not okay with what's happening, but they lack the tools, the argument, the education. It's overwhelming, and that's why, like, I think What as a Woman, as a piece of activist work, was extraordinary because it's going to cut through so efficiently and with such artistic merit as well.
Yeah, that it's
Um,
I mean, it really it's just exactly what we needed, and as we go through this talk today, I'm also hoping you'll get to why you think we don't have more of it. But I do want to ask you about running specifically. What tips do you have for that? Because that's completely foreign to me. Like, how do you build a team? How do you prepare? How do you like? What do you do?
well, I first of all start preparing earlier than you think. Um, there is a lot to learn. That being said, it really isn't that difficult. If you ever had a small business, if you had to file a Schedule C on your IRS, you can do campaign finance. So the first thing you would do if you decide to run is probably your county auditor, whoever handles the elections in your area. You'd contact them and get a schedule of when the filing dates, etc., are. Um, then you would go to your state and look at the campaign finance. Like, state of Washington has an amazing website, walks you through campaign finance, the software. It's electronic software for filing. It's just like filling out, like if you're just doing some data entry. It's not that hard. Do not be overwhelmed by that part. But also at the same time, especially if you're wading into a contentious area, make sure you are perfect in your campaign finance, because people will come after you and try to get you on campaign finance violations, tiny stuff. So always make sure you hit every deadline. Do not mess around with that. Then your next step will be working to build a team. And the very first part of the team you should look at is, what is your image going to be? What is your look going to be? How are you going to present to the public? And this involves your website, graphics, logo, videos. I think video is really important in social media. So finding people who can help you in those areas if you don't have the skills.
Mhm.
These materials, your fundamental materials, must be professional. You have to look legitimate. You can't look like you just cut and pasted something together for the PTA newsletter. No offense, I ran the PTA newsletter and I have cut and pasted in my time. But you need to look as legit as possible so that you look bigger and more powerful than you are. That's part of the goal. Is you want to present power, you want to present unstoppable, that I am in this to win it. I am not messing around. So I guess too, before I move further into to getting your team, one thing that you have to learn when you're doing this work is learning to be comfortable asking for things and asking for help, and being explicit and intentional with what you need. So, say you're starting to run, you want to run, you start putting out the word amongst your network. Hey, I need somebody to manage my campaign finance. Hey, can somebody help put my website together? Who could shoot some video for me and take my portrait for the election book? Um, so you can start like looking in when I did crisis counseling, there's what we call the resource ring. And the resource ring is you in the middle, then your family and close friends is the next ring, then maybe your extended family is a little further out, then you have your local community, your national community, et cetera, and the rings keep getting bigger and bigger. So don't be afraid to ask for exactly what you need, and be open to utilizing the skills that come your way. And you will probably need some help with fundraising, volunteers, but again, don't be discouraged if you can run your campaign on a shoestring budget. My city's about 50,000 people, and I ran a credible campaign on a budget of about $12,000. The highest race in my for the council was one gentleman raised $90,000. Unfortunately, he didn't win. So use work with your strengths. If you have a lot of rich friends, you can run with money. If you're creative and artistic like me, you can use art and social media to advance your cause. So when you're thinking about your campaign and what you want to do, play to what your strengths are, but then look at how you can complement them on your team. And it's a lot of it is about building relationships and having having a reasonable social game. Like you do have to be friendly and confident and show leadership. They say that your campaign is an audition for your job performance. So that's how I treated it. And like whenever some sort of crisis or something would hit the city, I'd go through the mental exercise. Well, what would I do in this situation? And then I'd write about that and tell people, well, this is what I would do in that situation,
Right, right.
etc. Practice your public speaking, getting used to being on camera. That was a challenging one for me. I hadn't been on camera. I was one of those people like, oh no, no, thank you to the picture. But as you start to see yourself on camera, your inner critic will go away from your appearance toward your performance. Look into the camera, which I always got to remember. um, uh, but those are like areas of personal growth that I never necessarily expected going into the campaign, but happened as well. So going for that win-win.
Mhm.
Now, the final point I want to make about this right now, it seems it is really hard to get people on board for anything. Anything. People are so overwhelmed right now. A lot of people are have facing financial stress that that's the number one issue in their life, making the mortgage, getting the kids cared for, caring for their parents, all those stressors. So do not underestimate how hard it will be to get people. That being said, I'm not saying this to discourage you, but more to focus on maybe don't necessarily go for the large, massive team of 100 sign waivers, but try to assemble a smaller, agile team of reliable people as a goal and work to those strengths. And, I'm disabled, so I couldn't do the campaign like other people with doorbelling and sign waving every day. I just physically couldn't do it. So that's why I was forced into the constraint of social media, making videos. But my videos got hundreds of views and they got shared, and I saw people quoting some of the statistics I'd throw out. So play to your strengths. You can do this. They are no smarter, better, or savvier than you are.
Right. And then this is another great point from John. He says, running against established politicians also forces them to actually defend their positions and allow their policies to be held up to scrutiny. Too many career politicians just coast by uncontested. This is so true in local elections. I can't tell you
Absolutely.
how many people locally where it's like, there's no other option for me to vote for. It's like, I'm stuck with this judge, or I'm stuck with this city council person, or I'm stuck with whatever. Other times we'll get 5 or 6 candidates, but and then you really have to do your homework. But it's like feast or famine
Well,
sometimes, and they run uncontested. Mhm.
yes, and I think the biggest challenge we actually faced, we there were actually four of us that ran together. We didn't run as a slate; we ran individually, but our goal was to take a majority of city council and then be in control. Sadly, not one of the four of us made it onto the council.
Mm.
Um, and I think one of the biggest things we faced was this black pill apathy that, well, we got crazy or crazier. We needed to be stronger in getting our message out that there was an alternative beyond crazy or crazier. And that was a little bit of challenge because people were like, why bother voting? We're just, why bother? And so, one thing I aim to be, another really key point for these local races, is you'll go to a lot of dinners and forums where all the candidates will be there, and you get asked questions and you get to speak. And I'll tell you what, they are boring as hell. You will want to chew your leg off because most of these people just go in, they blah 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 words, equity, blah 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 words, equity, blah blah words. And so my goal going in to these forums, both Zoom and in real life, were two. One, to be memorable. I gave speeches and spoke with sharp and clear rhetoric. And also, my other goal was to go in and make them feel uncomfortable. Exactly, make them defend what they've done, make them psychologically uncomfortable, and they didn't know what question or point I was going to bring up because I had been bird dogging the council for 4 years. So I knew it all, and I knew points I could hit that were hard. And so I wanted them to be uncomfortable and off guard so they'd be putting off like anxious body language, and that they wouldn't just be sitting there with their smug little smiles talking blah blah blah. There's a format to it actually here, a little bit of levity. um, they will get asked a question that deserves a real answer. So here's how they answer. First of all, I'd like to thank you, sir, for that wonderful question. It's a question that really a lot of people have asked me, and it's a question I've thought about a lot. Blah 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 equity. And then they will give a little bit of anecdote from their personal life or their friend that shows that they understand the issue. And then, well, that's an issue now, this question, we need to now take action on this question, and I am the one that's going to do this action that's unspecified and undetermined, but it shows I'm a good person.
You nailed it. I mean, you nailed it. That's exactly right. And I have fantasized about being in a position to get questions like that and just looking at the person saying, well, do this or nothing, or, like whatever the actual answer would be, for no other reason than to be different. Because at this point, I think you will be memorable if you actually answer a question.
Oh,
Everybody expects the Kamala Harris answer.
definitely, definitely. And, I would say shocking things like, well, OPD are not the problem, but they could be part of the solution. Or here's another one that here's a third rail that still you can't talk about in Olympia with the homeless, is that personal responsibility plays a role in getting and staying housed. Just things like, oh my goodness, clutch the pearls, things that cannot be said but are so simple. And so, and then here's another trap that the candidates would fall into. When you do your introduction, you get like 2 or 3 minutes to introduce yourself. And so I'm candidate X. I've lived in Olympia, blah, blah, blah years. and I'm married and I have two dogs, and these dogs are quite a hoot, and my kids are awesome. As you know, I have kids and dogs, and my cousin's gay, so I'll get some points for that. So I'm going to mention my gay cousin, and I went to school here, and they just go on and it fades into oblivion. Like I said, you want to chew your leg off. So I would go in and I'd give a speech. I'm not going to waste my 3 minutes on this. It's the artistic principle of show, don't tell. I'm not going to
Yeah.
tell you about my leadership qualifications. I'm going to show you my leadership in my rhetoric, and by being even the most modicum of entertaining will get people's attention in these situations.
They're falling asleep in their rubber chicken.
Oh yeah, there's lots of barbecues,
Yep,
a
that
lot of
too.
burgers and dogs. But
Oh
it's
my
great.
goodness.
I mean, you do kind of have to love meeting people and talking to people. I mean, it'd be challenging for me, because I have chronic pain, so I'm in pain a lot. So I really have to work on my social games so that I don't look like I'm in pain and I'm friendly. But I think you still, you can get used to it,
Mhm.
and I think there's a real craving for authenticity. Like, people want the real. People want
Oh
they
yeah.
don't they're done with the fake. And I mean, people win with the fake. We all lost to fake. But I, I think there's something noble about going in guns blazing, and when I'm talking about being aggressive or anything, I'm not talking about being a jerk. In fact, almost the opposite. If you're going to go into this work, you have to be absolutely bulletproof in your conduct. You have to, I call it radical decency. And it comes kind of easy to me because I'm a decent person. You shouldn't have to work at it, but just, never, like, I will attack policy all day, but I won't attack a person for who they are or anything like that. I fight fair, but I fight.
Right.
I'm going to play fair, and I'm going to be decent, and I'm not going to give you ammunition to attack me on my behavior. I'm going to stay emotionally even,
Mhm.
factual, and intellectually honest, and
Mhm.
force it that way.
What does it take to be a public figure like that, though, even if it's at the local level? I think what phases a lot of people is they are nervous about being in the public eye. They want to do something, but people are vicious with people who step out to do something, and so I think it takes a certain kind of person, or at least a certain kind of mindset. What would you say it takes to be in a public figure?
Yeah,
Aside from what you just said about being bulletproof and decent, any other traits or things like that?
well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've been an artist all my life, but I never really was in the public, and there's not really any guidebook for making this transition. For me, it kind of happened organically over time, as my
Mhm.
writing caught notice, and I'm to the point where, I do get recognized relatively often. So when I go out, I feel I have to look nicer than I used to. I can't just, like, slump out. Like, I have, like, a little bit of that. And then there's a negative, definitely. Wading into the culture wars is, you have to have a spine and a will and a confidence. It grows. And when I started posting, at some point, this was about 2017, 2018, um, I realized I was self-censoring, and I made a list of all the things I couldn't talk about on Facebook. I couldn't talk about honestly, and it was about 30, 40 items. I'm like, wow, wow. I've never felt I've had to censor myself in my life as an artist, as a human. Uh, it was a real wake up call for me. So I started just speaking honestly. I vowed just as a philosophical thing that I'm just going to start saying what I think instead of not saying what I think. And, I've been canceled. I have had Antifa put out a disinformation campaign against me. That's been remarkably effective in poisoning the well in Olympia to the point where there are certain, like, I won't go downtown walking alone anymore. If I'm going to go downtown, just going out, I have to be with someone, or I'll go to a specific event and go in and out and not hang around alone because I've been verbally harassed and light physical harassment. I had a campaign rally in September in front of City Hall where Olympia police were, and an armed mob of Antifa, about 30 of them, came to attack me. The Proud Boys then swooped in and white knighted the situation, chasing Antifa from the location. In the process, a Proud Boy got shot. So the safety risks and the psychological risks are real. You I guess where I was starting with the thread was start small and your courage will build. As you face different social and other safety challenges, um, you you will adapt and you'll find a way to cope. I use humor a lot, especially around the Antifa thing, but I also take practical steps that assess your situation. And I know for parents, like for me too, it's a little easy for me to say I live alone. I'm on my own. I don't have a business. This isn't going to affect my family or my my job. I have lost some economic things because of it.
Right.
Um, so it's easy for me to say, but these are things you do have to weigh when deciding to go in. And I think when the decision comes down to, do you want to just stand by and watch? As I
Hmm.
said before, nobody is going to save you.
Right.
You you are responsible for this. And if you can't wade in on the front lines, do what you can to support the people who are. I sound like the reparations talk now. We're exhausted, give us money. But no, if you find candidates that are doing that you believe in, find a way to help them. Even if they're not in your district or area, if you find a candidate that you think is good for the country, throw some weight behind him in whatever with whatever resource you can. If you're a website designer, help somebody with their website. My graphic art was done by a volunteer that I met on Twitter, and he did such a fabulous job for it, and I was so grateful for it. So people are out there to catch you, and I will say, coming through the crucible of being hated, and once you're a little hated, Megan Kelly joked about, what, are you gonna hate me more? So what?
Oh, I like that. I like that. That's good. That's good. That's a
It
really good point. There's a limit, isn't there?
and it really will build your emotional resilience. It will show what you're proven. The events of my rallies in September set in motion the Olympia Antifa cell kind of being broken up, the legal and press scrutiny shone a light on them, and now Olympia's, they're always under the surface, but they're not coming out and counter protesting the conservatives anymore. So that's a
Right.
win.
That's right. Now, what kind of tactically what pieces of information would you say are essential for any prospective candidate to get hold of in preparing for a run for office or in doing this kind of activism? What's the most powerful, or what's powerful in general?
Well, if you're going to run for office, specifically getting the filing, the legal, and the campaign finances, I noted is incredibly important.
You
Uh,
mentioned though you had when you were doing your truth telling, at these, when you would use statistics and stuff. How did you go about were you looking just in the news? Or did you get some other kinds of information that helped you make these arguments in a way that people really couldn't refute or would have a harder time?
Well, I I'm slightly autistic, and when I get on a topic, I really go deep into it. And so, why I was uniquely suited to run for city council is I had been studying and writing public safety and the homeless response for the past 5 to 7 years. And so I had read just thousands of documents. I'd done Freedom of Information Act to get the documents. The number one thing in any of this work, and I learned this from Survivor, 42 seasons of Survivor, information is power. Having information, having more information, knowing how to deploy that information, who to share that information with, um, that that's what will give you that self-confidence to be sure in your opinion and what you're doing, is knowing your stuff. And furthermore, and this is where being an artist and a writer comes in, is knowing the stuff and being able to put it in a story, and not in the fake way I was talking about before, where you give the anecdote about your gay cousin. But which, by the way, this act, I reference that because this actually happened in a forum. It was the PFLAG forum, and the questioners wanted to know how we had been influenced by gay people in our life,
Oh
gay
my
and
God.
trans people in our life, and what we did to, protect their human rights and stuff.
Like
And so,
that's a prerequisite. Like that has to have happened for you to be a decent person where people are concerned.
yes, and what was remarkably notable about it is everyone, they tried to out gay and out trans each other.
Oh my God.
So the stories were escalating stories of, how the more marginalized person they could put up. And it ended with who got reelected to our school board, Scott Cliffthorne. He talked about how him and his wife are both poly and both in open relationships and both have same sex lovers. So he had the ultimate card. So yeah, that's our school
That
board
just
member.
it just like makes me so uncomfortable. Like, why do I shouldn't have to know any of that about the public servants who represent me. That just is none of my business, and it shouldn't influence you.
Well,
It
and you know what?
shouldn't influence you at all.
I gave what I felt was the correct answer, in that I am running for office. I'm not going to publicly out my friends or family and what their sexual orientation is in a public forum, which
Thank
is
you.
how it would have been in the old days. You wouldn't out someone, my gay cousin, is transitioning. Like you wouldn't tell somebody else's story for political gain. But anyway, I spidered off there. Uh,
No, that's all right, but that's a really good point. I think that can be a differentiator actually. Just being respectful of people's ears when you're telling your stories and don't exploit others, whether it's with anecdotes or
oh right,
statistics,
yeah, we were
any of
talking
that.
about statistics and stories,
Yeah.
and so when information is power. So do take advantage of freedom of information. It's remarkably easy. I can't say it's remarkably easy in every location, but in Olympia, we can do it right from the web. You can go on the web to the city government page, look for public records requests. Sometimes you have to pay money. Other times you can get around paying money and go down and look at them in public and copy what you need. There is a little bit of an art and science to doing public records requests. Don't let it stop you. One thing, just the quickest tip is there are two approaches. One is going broad, where you're kind of going on the fishing expedition. And this is where you're, like I would do one for homeless response for the year 20 to 21 with these council members, the city attorney, etc. Or there's an activist organization in Olympia called Just Housing. I would like any documents on just housing for this year. That's the broad approach where you'll get, hundreds or thousands of emails and documents, and you just got to grind it, reading through them till you get the nuggets.
Hmm.
Like I got a text nugget of two city council members talking about how performative they thought Black History Month was, and talking about their guilt that they're not doing more. And then it was like you can just find things you can use. The other way is to go very narrow, and this is if you do have something specific and target it. The public records ladies will love you for the narrow, and you will get them much faster with the narrow. But then you might miss out on some of these other little interesting things you can use.
Right.
So yes, information. The more information you can gather, and that comes also from interviewing people, talking to people. Just any conversation I would have, I will learn something from it. From the bus driver, I used to take the bus. I'd talk to the homeless people at the bus stops, and I wouldn't be interviewing them as a reporter. I would just be having conversations with them, and I'd find out how unhappy they were with the service providers, which you never would hear about that from the service providers of the city. But when you talk to actual homeless people, they were not happy with the services either.
Right.
So you never know who might just give you a little tidbit that'll put it all together for you, and then it's, connecting the dots, and coming up with, how to be devastating, and looking
Right.
for those points of attack.
Right. Now you've said about storytelling that you need to give people permission to think. What do you mean by that?
Well, like as I said before, like you putting your words out there and giving logic to it. Like, let's use What is a Woman, since that's topical and a lot of people will have seen it, is like a lot of people felt uneasy about trans, but they didn't have the information. Matt Walsh was able to present that information in a form that was very digestible. So now people have that information and they can feel more confident talking about those information, or talking about gender ideology, because they will have been given some statistics. What was interesting, is I wrote about this, and so I was reporting on it and following social media. I saw people citing Scott Nugent's statistics. So people were citing the things that Scott Nugent mentions in the film
Hmm.
back on social media, and that's effective. That's the barometer. And when I was writing on homelessness, that was really cool for me, is when I would see people start citing the statistics I was throwing back out in their arguments. That's how you're penetrating, and that gives the people both the permission that no, I'm not a horrible person for thinking this is wrong, and the foundation, the education, the awareness to say why it's wrong. Well, it's wrong because it's sterilizing children. That's
Right.
why it's wrong. It's wrong because they're patients for life. So I think that's really important. And that's where the intellectual honesty is really important too. You don't want to be sensationalistic when I talk about devastating statistics. Um, you don't want to be sensationalistic, but you want things that catch people's attention. Like for
Hmm.
my council race, the city did a survey. 87% of Olympians were unhappy with homeless response. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Because people can talk about the problem, and I'm going to fix the problem. And it's like, well, you've been doing that for quite some time now, and 87% of people are unhappy with what you've done. Why should we let you keep doing it?
well, and
Right.
here, yeah, and here's, when you are running for office in particular, but people do want answers. You can't just go and say blah blah blah, equity, blah blah blah. Um, they want what are your solutions, and that can be challenging. And for me, I tried honesty, and that okay, I'm going to be one person,
Yeah.
and especially if I'm the only person on the council, my ability to actually change the votes is going to be minimal. That
Yeah.
being said, I've seen what one person on the council can do to influence the entire council in shifting the Overton window, because that's how we got here today. So I want to try to be that one person that's the antidote by that, by talking about the issue honestly, asking the questions that need to be asked, and
Mhm.
then trying to come up with the best solution we can given what we have.
Mhm.
So I think people appreciated that type of answer more than the blah blah blah.
Mhm.
But it's remarkable how far that blah 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 goes.
Well, that I was just going to say that one of the things that ails people right now, you mentioned apathy, you mentioned a kind of resignation that people have that, you know, they feel like the crazy one, they can't believe that crazy one, that ideas that even just a couple years ago, if you had said, oh yeah, half a class of fourth graders have decided to change their gender and it's perfectly normal and okay, we would have immediately said that's nuts. But today you can't even talk about it. And so a lot of people feel like they feel helpless and they feel like between the canceling stuff and just this notion that we live in the upside down at crazy one, they feel defeated. But you have some thoughts on tactics, like a specific actions that you would recommend people take, right, that to deal with that so that you can shift it back the other way. What are those?
Well, in activism in general, you you have your strategy. This is going to be your main goal. Um, what you want to do. Like, our strategy goal was we want to flip this Olympia City Council. Then you have tactics, and so your strategy is usually your high level picture, and it's a stable, relatively stable goal. Your tactics are what you do to get there.
Mm-hmm.
What and those can be very fluid and situational, and they should remain flexible. You should have ideas for different tactics to reach your goal, based on once they hit real life and what happens in real life. Um, I think what's important where we are right now is that you need to meet boldness with boldness. You cannot go in there and be timid and be like, oh, well, we would really like it if you stopped doing this. Um,
Yeah, no.
you have to learn to play offense, to make them react to you. You be the wild card, swinging to the fence, just aiming really high. And again, that's it's something that you will build to. You can't necessarily expect to go from hey, I really like if you stop doing that to you know I don't know if we can swear here, but no f's given. That doesn't happen overnight, but you'll build your capacity as you start speaking at city council meetings. You'll get braver, you'll get bolder, your rhetoric will get better. Each time you speak, you'll get a little less anxious. Each time you post on social media, you'll get a little less anxious. It's a muscle that you build, and I think, and you'll see what's behind me are board games. And my board gaming hobby gave me a framework for thinking about strategy and tactics, and I built a lot of my muscle from board gaming, and a lot of the lessons that I apply to this work, you know strategic strategy and tactics come from gaming. because a
Mhm.
lot of the principles are transferable, and one of them, is looking for those points of weakness, always looking for the point of weakness, and looking for opportunities that are situational where you can dive in and use to your advantage. The goal isn't necessarily brute force, and that's protest is dead. Protest is kind of like brute force. The the goal is to play at a slightly higher level and use intellectual finesse and creativity, because you're going up against these big institutions. They will brute force you. You can't go up against them using traditional techniques. So that's where you use asymmetry
Mhm.
and guerrilla tactics.
Mhm.
um you figure out a social media campaign, a hashtag. You figure out how you're going to start a hashtag, a social media campaign, perhaps that'll draw people into your cause. uh, there's so many different ways that you can start as an entry point. I'm talking about running for office a little more specifically today because I think it's a really critical skill, and it's one that, for parents, running for their local school board is definitely accessible.
Mhm.
And it, many many of the moms and dads we're talking to already are serving on the PTA, so this is just a small level up from PTA,
Mhm.
just taking it to the next level.
Right.
And so I think I really want to inspire people to give it a shot.
Now, you told me that there's one of the things that you like to do is, let crazy do the heavy lifting, like provoke them to do stuff. So rather than having it all on you to show how they're doing something wrong or they're crazy, you get them to tell people on their own. How does that work?
Absolutely, and it's corollary that you can't argue with crazy. So don't
Right.
bother. And I'll start with, you don't argue with crazy, just so I don't forget this part. Is when you argue with crazy, you're giving crazy power. You're taking crazy seriously. If we go back to what is a woman, again, Matt Walsh was brilliant at this, at provoking their insanity by asking very reasonable questions. He kept emotionally even. His questions were neutral. They were guiding them into a trap, but the questions themselves still were neutral. But I think often he thinks a couple steps ahead of where he wants the conversation to go, and he's not asking a leading question, but he's asking a question that he hopes is going to lead him to where he wants to go. And I
Mhm.
think that's brilliant. And by doing that, he was able to really get them to reveal their true agenda. And I mean, the gems he got, they're so funny, they're so tragic, but so funny. Can a chicken cry? Can a chicken commit suicide? He got them to say that. It's absolute rhetorical brilliance. So when 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 the crazy's going, let them go,
Get out of
and
their
and
way.
be recording it.
Right? Exactly. Exactly. And w- so but what are there's something you said that's called like dilemma actions. What's that? What are dilemma actions?
The dilemma action is a wonderful technique that, oh, we got the obligatory cat. The dilemma action is a technique that any activist or politician needs to learn. And what it is, it's an aggressive move. And this is also coming from gaming too. Gaming strategy is you force your opponent into a corner where they have no good choices. No matter what they do, they're not going to look good. So it's basically forcing an error on their part. And in general, it's using what you know about what you can predict about their reactions against them. And it's a trap to get them to get the crazy doing the heavy lifting. Is a dilemma action will often get you the crazy. So an example for me is, okay, so I talked earlier about the Antifa Proud Boy fiasco, and I knew I had called OPD and told OPD, hey, OPD, Antifa and Proud Boys are going to be 3 o'clock City Hall. They're going to be fighting on Saturday, and I count on you to protect me. And OPD's like, well, you should be prepared to protect yourself. And even though
So glad
OPD
we
knew,
pay your salary.
oh
Sorry.
my and so even though they knew they could have prevented a man getting shot, there was no presence there that day. So after it happened, here's the dilemma action that I forced with the incumbents. Is I went before a city council and I'm like, hey, this shooting happened. Say, oh, I forgot the part where the Antifa shot the Proud Boy in the middle of the Olympia Transit Center at 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. So in the middle of the transit center on a holiday weekend, it was filled with people. Antifa pulls out a gun and fires off 5 rounds in the middle. It's hit. The bullets are hitting off the post. Um, People are running. A woman, she abandons her walker. She's getting on the bus to get out of the way. Drivers are running. It was right at the peak hour when all the buses were there too. They were about to leave at 3 o'clock, so it was like peak boarding. So anyway, that happened, and so I went before city council, and the dilemma action was they could denounce the Antifa violence and lose votes and lose respect on the left, or by not denouncing it, they're showing they supported the Antifa violence, which is not a good look either. And believe it or not, I forced some good crazy that day. One crazy I forced was one councilwoman uh, basically talking about the disinformation campaign against me and that maybe I deserved it. Not in those words exactly, but that was the message. She was basically victim blaming me for the Antifa mob. So yeah, I use that. Um, I use that,
Wow.
and that brings me to the next principle, which is the example I was going to give was also Antifa related, and it's called the obstacle is the way. And the obstacle is the way is something I intuited, but I've read about formally. There's a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday that goes into in depth about it. I first learned about it reading Robert Greene and the 33 Laws of War, which I highly recommend for doing this work. You will get that's your practical textbook. Um, so the obstacle is the way is finding a way to use what seem to be setbacks to your advantage. So in this case, Antifa's on my ass. They've got this disinformation campaign about me. They put out my phone number. They're calling and leaving death threats, and it wasn't pleasant. Not pleasant at all. I was having to explore legal action. The worst thing I could have done though was let it suck up time and divert from my mission. So I tried to not let that happen.
Mhm.
So, to service of not letting this Antifa fucker, oh, almost said it,
Yeah,
Ecker,
it's okay.
Eckery, get on me, I found a way to use it as best as I could.
Right.
So, by the end, I was joking that like with I have one antagonist, my main antagonist. I was joking with him about on Twitter, like, "Hey, can I get his information so I can file an in-kind contribution with the PDC for the PR you've been doing for me?"
Right.
Because he was posting my articles everywhere, how shocking she is, etc. So I And that free PR is basically did get me insta votes. People are like, Antifa hates her. Oh, all right, I'm voting for her. Obviously, she's doing something right.
That
So it helped me that way. I got to show another way I used it to my benefit. I got to show leadership. How I handled Antifa showed how I would handle them when I was on the city council.
mhm.
So I got to show, my leadership, my spine, that I wouldn't be intimidated by them, etc. Where that was an interesting is I got allies in law enforcement. Um, I I have people from law enforcement coming up to me and saying, still even now, every now and then they'll come up, hey, thank you for speaking in our defense. Thank you for standing up to Antifa. I like what you're doing. So I got support from someone from an area that might have been challenging for me to get support because I'd been critical of OPD. It also got me media attention. I got some free media, interviews out of it. And I wrote about it to tell the story and give my reporting since I was, you know, a principal in the day. So even though it was an obstacle and unpleasant, I found a way to use it to my advantage in multiple ways, and that's the obstacle is the way. And it's a really handy technique for, challenges in your personal life as well.
That's great. Um, Now, I'm loving this. I love the dilemma thing is so underused. Like as you were describing it, I'm thinking about the show trial that's going on, like last night. And I just keep thinking about how, I see it on Twitter. People are trying to show people like what about the summer riots and what about when BLM rushed the Capitol and what about the but I don't see the people who are either trying to get into positions of power to take them away from the people who are there or even who are already there. I don't see them doing this at all. I don't see them saying, why are we here? And not also bringing in these other people. Like, why is this or do you, at the time, are you for this? Like, are you for this? And even when they were asking like the press secretary at the time, about it, when it was Biden was president and things were going on, or what about those riots? Or what about what happened with Kavanaugh? They just drop it. That should be picked up and go with it, go with it, go with it, go with it until you can't go with it anymore. Like force each and every one of these people to take a stand on what happened. You've got a Supreme Court justice who was threatened with assassination and there are people who should be answering for it and it's just like poof, bye.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's very, I mean, I understand what happened on January 6th. I saw it much more spontaneous, and I don't think we know the true story, but it was really hard to take it seriously because basically it was the playbook I watched in the Pacific Northwest for 2 years or longer than 2 years, but specifically from summer 2020 on in Portland, attacking the federal courthouse. The tactics, it was almost the same. Like they used the same. So, yeah, yeah. And the bill, you don't want to go into whataboutism. They're separate things. But yeah, the billions of dollars of damage done to those communities.
I mean, I guess
And
what I'm saying is at the time. So yeah, you're right. Right now it would be kind of a whataboutism and it's not really.
yeah.
But
Oh,
at the time, I kept waiting, especially prior to an election. We had an election year in 2020, and I kept waiting for people. It's fresh, like just happened that summer, and I was waiting for candidates to put other candidates in that dilemma situation of saying, well, this happened. What do you have to say? Because, like you said, they would either have to alienate their base or they'd be alienating small business owners, minority communities who lost their stores, who lost their homes and it just didn't materialize. That shocked me the most was that they
yeah.
should have been called on the carpet for that, in my opinion.
Yep, and many of them got rewarded. Like Ted Wheeler in Portland, he got reelected, although the alternative was more Antifa than Ted. Our mayor in Olympia took the knee to Black Lives Matter. They encourage this. One of our council members is relatively close with Antifa, former council member. She left.
Yeah.
Um, so and they tamped down, like, why wasn't OPD there? It's partially demoralization, and partially they lost a lot of their crowd control tools.
Mhm.
They were no longer allowed to use chemical dispersants, for example.
Mhm.
So they had a lot less tools to go in. So I think they're like, well, just let them sort it out.
Mhm.
And yeah, not what you expect from your public servants.
No, it's like it's sort of letting, letting opportunities just slip through their fingers. When you said we have a crisis of leadership, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Is I'm thinking about the people who've let opportunities to just lead on principle of rights protection. Okay, you've got small business owners own, they're taking care of their business, honest, whatever, and people come along and vandalize, burn it to the ground, whatever. It's like your rights don't matter. That's the message. If I were one of them, I would. That's the message I did get, even thousands of miles away. I'm like, this is, you're telling me in no uncertain terms that my rights will not matter when push comes to shove, and the right to protest, the mostly peaceful protest, is going to take precedence. And that seemed to be this, even without saying it, that's what they were saying.
Yep, and the same with the homeless encampments. I have within a mile of my house probably at least 200 homeless people living, rough, and they the response is to put the pathology of that group above the health of the rest of the community. And in doing so, those people, the longer they're living rough, the more likely they're to be chronically homeless and never get housed. The more you're out on the streets, the more you adapt to the camp life, the deeper connections you make to that community, the more your economic world revolves around the community. So it becomes stickier and stickier to get you out of it.
Mhm.
And you would be shocked at the conditions that we are allowing in our communities up and down the West Coast. They and I've had progressives defend them, saying, our progressive council member that's off the council now, but she's the one who influenced the council where this incrementalism happened. But she called them a cost effective solution to homelessness. So basically, it's not even people living in tents anymore. They built these makeshift structures out of tarps and pallets and scrounged materials. It's really resourceful. They have a remarkable resourcefulness and resilience and strength to live as they do. That being said, so many are in deep mental health crisis. There's intoxicated people walking into the roadways, people having mental health crises in front of you. You don't know what to do. People high on meth, tweaking, being aggressive, people nodding out like, are they dead? Are they just nodding at the bus stop? It's you're confronted in my daily life when I'd go out taking the regular bus, I'd be confronted with these scenes of misery where I was absolutely powerless to do anything. I could maybe have a conversation, make maybe a little attempt to make sure they're alive, or just the minimal things to check on their well being in the moment. I've had to hold the guy who was out of it. He was in a wheelchair, he was rolling into traffic. I had to hold him till the
Yeah.
cops arrived. These types of things. And I felt so powerless. And I guess that powerlessness, to wrap it around in the circle here, is that feeling of powerlessness is what led me to the agency of writing about it, reporting on it, learning about it, talking about it, influencing people about it, and then ultimately running for office last year.
Mhm. Yeah.
So in 2017, when the camp was 50 people behind my house, I never would have guessed that that camp would lead me, disabled me, to run for city council with a credible and serious campaign.
Right.
So you the journey can be strange.
Well, but I can relate because it, after almost 10 years of fighting around the schools my kids were going to, and that's with my own children. Prior to that, when I was, working in and around schools, a volunteer and a tutor, always on the side of whatever day job I had. But I I felt really, really helpless. And when I decided to do this channel, because I don't see myself running for office, but when I decided to become an advocate for parents and an educator of parents and other people who are concerned about education, it was born out of that sense of helplessness. It did come out of a feeling of I can't seem to be effective locally. um I can have a conversation here, a conversation there, but maybe if I amplify my voice out into social media or out in the internet, maybe people will listen. And so when I started, I had no hope of anyone tuning in. It'd be like three people and they're all my friends, like watching. And then it grew and grew, slowly but surely. And then one day I woke up after having just a few hundred subscribers, and one day I woke up to over 1,000 subscribers because one person with a much bigger following had seen me and decided that other parents should see me, and shared, kind of did a preview of my whole channel and said, hey, everybody needs to go subscribe and, get more, let's make this bigger. So you really don't know, like you said, you don't know who's going to hear you, who's going to be inspired by you, um, how far that's going to go. But what I love about the message you've given us here today, Candace, is how to make something a win no matter what. Set yourself up to win even if you lose. I love that message. And I think that is so, so important for everybody watching or listening to take from this, because I think that's key to actually winning the fight, is like being willing to lose, because that's still a win in this situation. Because I think a lot of people are counting on us not to speak, that fear to just take over.
Yep, yep. And I think it's just a matter of the classic, enjoying the journey as much as the destination, and having a radical stoic acceptance of whatever happens, you'll find a way to use it. You'll
Right.
find a way to make it work, even if it's something that makes you angry. You don't want to become overly angry and become bitter and resentful, but that anger is an energy that can propel you to write that article, to find that extra hour after the kids have gone to bed, and finding a pro-social outlet for that energy instead of just complaining on internet, or being mean to people on the internet. Finding a way to channel that aggression in a pro-social way was another reason I ran for council. I had no idea a middle-aged woman could feel this level of rage, and I needed a way to get it out. And I think running for office is a socially acceptable way to be aggressive.
I I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. So, tell us where we can find you now. Where can the audience find you to follow your work and, support you and all that kind of stuff? And I hope you run for mayor. Please run for mayor. Like, I want to support your campaign for mayor. This can be your channel. You can
I
be Candace's channel.
I think it would be fun, and I do feel, because of what I learned in the first go around, I I I still think I would be a long shot, because I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of people running for that position. But that also could be an opportunity that gives me just that edge, because of name recognition from my previous race, to beat the rest in the field. So who
Well,
knows?
at least you'd keep them on their toes.
Yep.
And I think it would be a great race for that, because it sounds like you are the candidate that voters desperately need, whether they're able to get you into that seat or not. You're going to be poking at the people who might win and exposing their flaws, and at least maybe the best of the worst will will be elected.
Yeah, they won't be looking to another forum season with me.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. But I think
anyway,
that's a
oh,
win, right? By your estimation,
yep,
that's a win. So
it's one of
where can
them.
we find you, social media, Substack, etc.? Tell us.
Yeah. If you just Google me, Candace Mercer, I have a YouTube with all the materials from my campaign up there, and I eventually want to do more videos teaching people how to do activism. That's my main goal that I'm working on developing that curriculum.
Hmm.
You can follow me on Substack if you'd like to support me financially. You can donate through Substack by becoming a monthly member or making a one-time donation. And then I generally hang on Twitter. That's my social media, and so um, that's where I'm offensive, and I'm working
No,
on
you're assertive.
assertive,
You're not
right?
offensive.
Well, I'm actually, I guess I should plug this, is I am working to develop my art into a line of merchandise to support producing my YouTube channel.
There you
So
go.
I will have I in my big evil plan, I just chunking it out. So getting my art and getting a store open. I hope to have it open sooner or later. But I have some really interesting art that I think people will like, and
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah.
I can't wait to see it, and I'm so grateful. This was so helpful, and as I said, and I'm saying it again to the audience who may have come late or people watching on the replay. I admitted I was wrong. I was advising everyone to skip running for school board because it's not going to change the curriculum in the classroom, but I was thinking too small. It may not change the curriculum in the classroom, but it will change the conversation. So if you're willing, if you're in mind to do it, and if you follow the plan that Candace laid out for you, I can't talk today. I say go for it. And I apologize if I dissuaded anyone who was otherwise going to be motivated to do it. I'm concerned about the kids because I'm sort of still in mom mode. I'm still thinking of, like, you have a small kid in school. I don't want that backlash to come back on the kid. I don't want you're going to need all your energy and resources to focus on what they're being taught every day and what's happening inside their Chromebook. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that what it takes and what your likelihood of success once you get on the board is before you undertook it. But if you understand that reality and you still want to do it, there's value to do it. So mea culpa, please listen to Candace. Don't listen to me.
Well, I
And
think
that'd
there's
be
a
great.
hybrid too. I mean, I think
Yeah.
real concerns about backlash against your kids, and
Yeah.
that's where, if you have a strong family, a strong other network, you will be setting an example for your kids. You're going to be
Right.
role modeling the type of courage you'd like to see in your children yourself, and
Right.
you really can't put a price on that.
That's right. Just leave them home and don't turn them into little activists. That's all we ask.
Absolutely.
All right. Candace, this was fabulous. And thank you, everybody who watched. Please like, share, subscribe, follow Candace on Substack. Go Google or get on her YouTube. Watch those videos. They will be instructive to your own run. And I appreciate everybody's time today. I'll see you next time.
Thank you.